The video you're about to watch is a run-through of a presentation being made for NEOPC, Northeast Ohio PC Club, March the 9th, and the topic is Linux. For well over a year we have been talking about Linux and whether people that have computers that are running XP would want to switch to Linux, and we've been discussing Windows 10 and privacy issues, and perhaps Linux is the solution there. The presenter, myself, Bruce Brockman, did a presentation on Linux in November of 2014, and was a fairly all-encompassing type presentation. This one will be a little more in-depth. I'm going to recommend two different distributions, and distributions are unique operating systems. One for older computers that are probably running XP at this point or were upgraded, and one for more modern computers that have more RAM and better hardware. So let's get started and talk about Linux. This is the front page of the presentation that was done in November of 14, Confessions and Consternation of a Linux Newbie. And I've changed newbie because I'm not after making this presentation to Zedek, which means proceeding by inquiry. And there are so many questions left in my mind about Linux and who should run it and why they should run it. That presentation is available to NEOPC members on the forum. This link at the bottom will take you there. And every page in this presentation that has a little, that's Tux, the penguin, which is the icon for Linux. If there's one up in the corner, that means there's a link that will clarify some of the information on that page. The entire presentation from 14 is at that link. And also included on the forum with a link to this video will be a 3-page PDF that has all of the links for the pages of this presentation. And that can be found on our forum at Educational Presentations. That's where it's going to be posted, and that's where the 2014 was posted. This is an excerpt from a letter that was the President's letter in the Nibbles and Bites, the NEOPC newsletter in November of 14. I was questioning the wisdom of using Linux, and it's worth a read. That link to that will also be in the forum. Still probably questioning the wisdom of it. But we're here to talk about whether you want to switch to Linux or not, and to switch or not to switch. That is the question. And the answer, I'm going to try and convince you wholeheartedly of my answer. Yeah, a very strong maybe. So if your computer looks like this and it's not running Linux, I don't think you want to put Linux on it. That's probably not going to be of much help to you. But if your computer looks like one of these, yes, maybe. So you need to ask yourself, do you, mostly when you're using a computer, surf the web, send and receive emails, use Microsoft Office products, might be Word or Excel or any of the Microsoft Office products, watch videos and listen to music, utilize digital photography, spend time on social media, pursue genealogy, and we'll talk a little more about that later. If that's pretty much you on a computer, you are now a probably instead of a maybe. Biggest question really is hardware compatibility. This is an excellent article about troubleshooting problems if you have problems, although I've chosen distributions that hopefully won't give you problems. The real issues that come up are graphics cards. And some time ago, in a company that I owned, I spent a lot of time with a computer manufacturer in their plant where they were manufacturing computers in their R&D department. And most of their time was with new configurations of computers and making sure that all the drivers were compatible with the operating system that they were going to furnish with it. So when you put in a distribution of Linux, an operating system, it could have to deal with any of thousands, literally, of graphics cards, and it has to be able to work with all of them. Graphics cards is probably still the biggest issue, although the generic drivers that they're putting in with Linux now seem to work extremely well. During the preparation of this presentation, it took me 2.5 days and basically crashed a computer trying to get a graphics card to function rather than using the generic driver. So I still have to look forward to straightening up those computers. Anyhow, there are lots of links that help you with graphics card drivers. Xorg is another company that 501c company that helps with graphics. LAN cards run into about the same level area network cards where you plug in to the internet. But again, there are some generic drivers that seem to pretty much handle that. And there's help to be had if you have problems in that area. Wireless adapters, if you're running your computer connected wirelessly to the internet, there are only a few of them that really work well with Linux, and the solution there is just to go to Amazon and you can pick one up for as little as $10. That would be probably my choice if the one I had didn't work well with the distribution of Linux that I was going to have. USB, you would think that that wouldn't be a problem, but there are some new sort of USB formats, media transfer protocol and picture transfer protocol, that do give some problems to some Linux distributions, and again, there's help available. And finally, printers. Printers used to be the biggest problem, and probably 5 years ago, maybe only 30% of the printers were compatible with Linux. Today, that number has probably moved up closer to 60 to 70%. Again, there's an awful lot of help available. There are some generic drivers, a whole lot of things, and during my putting this presentation together, that wasn't one of the problems. One of the big issues about Linux has always been the use of the terminal. This is where you type in commands. The terminal, the blankety-blank terminal, that's what normally turns people off to Linux. I've tried to put this together so that you can run Linux and not have to deal with the terminal. probably 99% sure that we could do that. So the terminal takes DOS commands, and there's an entire language that Linux uses. They call it bashing the terminal, and they have what's called the cheat sheet, and this gives you a list of the types of commands that you would type into the terminal to make different things happen. Find the best file search tool fast, find file name, and you can type all those things in. Although Linux is getting to be more Windows-like, and some of those functions can happen with just a click of the mouse. But most dyed-in-the-wool Linux users prefer to use the terminal, so bless their hearts, they should do that. We're not pushing that today for you. This is a list of all of the, not all, but most of the Unix and Linux commands that can be typed into a terminal. Break out of a while, for each, or until loop. That's what the break command means. Okay, we're going to try and keep you away from the terminal if we can. Now, there is an immense amount of help available, very specific to each distribution of Linux and so on. You have to be able to have a little bit of some search skills, and you have to be willing to read a lot if you are really serious about getting into Linux. You know, all the answers are easily, found online, mostly. So, now, if you are going to switch to Linux, the good news, again, I'm trying to make this as positive as possible, maybe. The good news is we've chosen some really good distributions that should make your life a lot easier if you make the switch to Linux. And we're going to talk about these distributions now. Today we're going to be talking about Linux distributions. And a distribution is actually an individual operating system. In Linux there are literally hundreds of them. Each one was written for a very specific need, maybe to do with audio and visual, or mathematics, or whatever. There are some that are general purpose. We are only going to look at 3 of them today, which I've chosen and I think would be beneficial if you're considering moving to Linux. But I did want you to see that there are literally hundreds of Linux operating systems available. And I'm just going to give you a quick peek at them. We're on Wikipedia now, and they're showing a list of Linux distributions. So it goes, starts here, and each one of these is a distribution. 64 distribution attempts to specialize in audio and visual production, both in a 32 and 64-bit workstation, and so on. Each one has a brief description of why it was written, and whether it's being supported or not supported, and so on. So we'll just keep going down, and you can see that there are lots and lots and lots of these things. A little difficult to pick out exactly the ones that we want, although there's some that are much more popular. One that we're going to look at today is Mint, which is right right here. Fourth most popular operating system in the world. But as you can see, this list goes on and on and on. Each one for a very special reason. Somebody took the time to write an operating system. So I sifted through the list and came up with 3, and we will be talking about those 3 in depth. But I did want you to see that there are more of them available if you don't like those 3. Okay, the first distribution we're going to talk about is Linux Mint. The current version of that is 17.3. And when you talk about Linux, you'll hear them talk about LTS, long-term support. And Linux 17.3 Mint is supported until April 2019. That means there'll be updates for the system, and there'll be security updates and all that sort of stuff. You'll hear often that you don't need security in Linux. Not true. But it certainly isn't the target that Windows or even Apple are at this point. So let's explore Linux Mint a little bit. Right after I tell you about Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is by far and away the largest Linux distribution out there. And Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu. I chose Linux Mint because it more closely resembles Windows than does Ubuntu itself. This is more Mac-like, Apple-like. So this current version of Ubuntu is 14.04.4, long-term support until February of 2021. Runs extremely well. It's much smaller in size than Mint is and doesn't have as many prepackaged programs that come with it. But excellent distribution of Linux. And the other one we're going to recommend for older machines is Ubuntu, which means low resource machines. Based on Ubuntu, it just has a lot less packaged in it. It's a light version of it. Runs extremely well, and long-term support for the version that we're going to be looking at, 15.10, actually is based on Ubuntu's 14.4. So it's supported till 2021 also. And again, you can see that there were the links to the sites. They'll be on the PDFs if you want to go read some more in depth before you do anything. So when I was putting this together, my wife didn't think I should include this page. I think it makes a lot of sense. I got to tell you a quick story. Once again, in another life that I had at one point, I was putting some things together for our CIA, and I was in Langley, Virginia, in a lobby there, and there was a large black box about the size of a good-sized refrigerator sitting in the middle of the lobby. And I said to my escort, I said, "What, pray tell, is that? Are there bodies in there or what?" And he said, "No." He said, "That is a gigabyte hard drive." And I said, "Oh my God, who could ever use that much space on a hard drive?" Well, anyhow, you're looking at a hard drive from the 1980s. It was a 10 megabyte hard drive for $3,398, which roughly is $340 a meg. And that actually was a refurb. The new ones were over $12,000. Anyhow, most people relate better to dollars than they do to megabytes. So we're talking about, originally in the 2014 presentation, I said Linux Puppy is the lightest functional version of Linux, and it runs on 154 megabytes. So if you had to buy megabytes at the prices in 1980, you'd have to pay $52,000 just to run the operating system. The computer that I'm doing this presentation on is my Windows 7 machine. I just looked at the Windows folder, and there's 44.6 gigabytes of information there, which in those terms would have cost $15 million just to run the operating system. The two we're going to be talking about today, Mint is a fairly complete operating system. Not quite as complete in some areas as Windows might be, but in some other areas probably better. In those terms, it's only a $2 million operating system as opposed to a $15 million operating system. And the light Ubuntu comes in at a amazingly low, only $917,000. It's a good thing that memory costs have come down substantially, or we would be doing a different kind of computing today than we are. So let's get into Linux Mint 17.3. And you'll see that it's very similar in that it has a start button, basically, that brings up the menu. On the left side, these are stationary buttons here. This is Firefox, your internet program. You can put other ones on. They won't go here, but you can put other ones on. This is how you search for software for your computer. You click that button and we'll show you what happens in a little bit here. This is to change some of the settings in your computer. This is the dreaded terminal. This is basically Windows Explorer, and it's their file explorer. This is if you're going to leave your machine alone, they're concerned about security. You can lock the machine until you come back and enter your password. This puts the machine into hibernation, and this is how you shut the machine down. When you talk about applications, when this is highlighted, all the applications that are in the machine are listed over here, and you scroll by just holding your mouse here. So in accessories, you have some familiar things like a calculator, a character map. Some people use that a lot depending on whether you're a writer or not. Files, font viewer, help, which is, there's excellent help available. The dreaded terminal is here. A short text editor is here. So on. Graphics, GIMP, image editor. There are people that seriously compare this to Photoshop. It is a very, very, very complete editor, photo editor. GThumb is sort of that for videos, but not exactly. Image viewer is just quick to see what you have. GThumbs can also organize all of your video or your photos. And Simple Scan, when I was talking about printers, the biggest problem with printers has always been their scanners don't connect well in Linux. This program, Simple Scan, was developed so that any scanner will work with your Linux installation, although wirelessly, not necessarily. Internet. This is your browser, although like I say, you can add Chrome and Safari, whatever you would care to add. There are versions available for you. XChat is to go into chat rooms. Big for Linux users, get you into libraries of what all is available to talk about. This is an instant messenger. Thunderbird is a email client. I think the best on the market. That is what I use. Transmission is a BitTorrent handler. If you know what that is, great, and you know you've got one. If you don't worry about it. Office. What comes with this pre-installed is Libre Office, which is open office. Can deal with all of the Microsoft Office formats. I've been using it for well over a decade, and just I'm sold on it. So if you need something special beyond that, there are things special beyond that. Sound and video. Banshee is to listen to music. This one allows you to burn discs. Kazam is a program that I actually loaded. This doesn't come native to Mint. I did some screenshots and I did some screen captures, and this is the program that I use for that. Videos is a standard Linux program to deal with videos. Light, very light editing. And VLC Player has been my favorite video player forever. It can, if you can't play it there, it probably can't be played. Administration tools, and again, familiar things. A backup tool, which is always nice to have. A driver manager, and that's nice to have certainly in Linux. Gparted is a partitioning tool. We'll talk a little later about that. If you decide, and again, this was running off of a disk. If you decide to install Linux Mint, here's where you click. You can look at log files. You can do a variety of things in the software manager, which is this, is here. Preferences. Oh, printers. Let's talk about printers, right? So when I clicked on printers, it said add a printer, and I said yes. And this is the window that came up, and it says where you can add the printer. And it immediately found I had two printers that were on the wireless network, and it found both of those, no problem, and easily installed. So they've done a good job as far as printers are concerned. Okay, preferences, account details and backgrounds and Bluetooth, and change the dates and all that sort of thing is under your preferences. And again, this preference thing goes on for a long time. Languages and your network and your mouse settings and so on are all under preferences. Places is like library in Windows. It contains your folders for documents and music and pictures and videos and downloads. And I had a thumb drive plugged in, and it was called Puppy 2 that I was pulling out the screenshots I took. And recent files is just what it says. These are the screenshots that I took that you're looking at here. Oops, went past one. We'll go back here. So this is the software manager, and as you can see, there are 74,235 packages, and that's what they call programs or packages, available through this software manager. And they're broken down into these categories. And installation and uninstallation is quite simple with Linux. You click on the package and it installs it. You click on the package and it uninstalls it. Not a lot of questions and things to deal with. One of the most important ones that I think you need to install first is a program called Wine. And Wine is an interface that allows you to run Windows programs in other operating systems, Linux, and even Mac OS 10 operating systems. You can run most of the programs that are Windows programs that way. And there are other things. This Play on Linux is basically to deal mostly with games, and I am told, I'm not a gamer, so I am told that it is absolutely excellent. Almost all of the Windows games will play in Linux through the use of this, and it doesn't slow it down any at all. Again, so I'm told. This is the Wine site. The current stable version is 1.8.1. And you can go through and they rate all the different Windows programs and how they install, and they rate them as platinum, which means absolutely no problems at all. Gold is minor. Silver is you'll be able to run it. You may have a couple issues. Bronze, you need to be a little bit computer savvy to want to deal with it that way. And that's their site. So I did a quick search for, as there are 28,700,000 results, Microsoft Office in Linux. And the first thing you hit here is first install the Wine package from your Linux distribution software package repository. So once you do that, it really is quite easy beyond that if you absolutely can't live without your Microsoft Office programs.
Well, we're going to give you a quick tour of the taskbar in Linux Mint 17.3. As you saw from the stills, it has a very similar pop-up to your Windows, where you have all these categories, and these are the subcategories that go with them. There are lots of subcategories for preferences. It's actually much easier to use than Windows is. The icons for open programs are here, and you can pin programs to the taskbar. Over here it shows that it's a live session. We're not signed in because we're running this off of a CD. This shows that we're connected to the internet. Here we can adjust the speaker volume as you do in Windows, and also allows you to adjust the screen brightness if you want to. It's saying we're not up to date, but the reason we're not up to date is because we're running this off of a CD. This is the icon for the program that we're running now, Shazam. That is the screen recorder program. It's a pure Linux program. Time, and similar to Windows 10, this version of Mint, as most Linux versions have multi windows for desktops, so that you can group if you're doing personal things and business things and whatever. And this is where you can switch. This, they call it workspace. We're workspace 1, having added a separate workspace to it. So again, this was just a little test video so that you can see that Linux programs work extremely well. And we will shut this off now.
Okay, it's time to start talking about Ubuntu. And again, this would be for primarily XP machines with 2 gig or less of RAM, older video cards. Just something that you do the basic things we were talking about doing. So this is what the opening screen looks like, and you would want to, while this is highlighted, use the up and down keys. While this is highlighted, hit enter, and it'll take you to your desktop, which looks like this. The desktop for Mint is called Cinnamon, the one we were using. They do have a variety of different desktops. This one does not. This only has what you're looking at here. Well, I say that, but it can be changed. But that's another presentation altogether. So again, this has a similar start type button, and as you can see, there's a lot less here. But indeed, it's similar. So under accessories, You have a character map, and you have a file manager, Explorer, calculator, image viewer. You can do some quick editing, and that sometimes is for the use of the terminal. Screenshot I actually put on here. I had to install this so we could have these screenshots to look at. Doesn't come packaged in, but again, you go to the software manager, type in screenshot, and in less than a minute it's installed. And there are several different ones. I used the basically GNOME native one. Graphics. A document viewer, and there are good and bad reports on that. This is similar to Microsoft Paint, the graphics editor. And again, simple scan shows up here, so you can use your scanner if it's part of your printer or separate. The internet, they're again using Firefox, Instant Messenger. This is their email program. It's much lighter than Thunderbird, but there are over 100 million users worldwide, highly accepted and very functional. Looks similar to the Thunderbird interface. It comes packaged in Ubuntu. And under Office, we have AbiWord, which is a really complete word processing program. Can deal with almost any format, open almost any format, and save in almost any format. Highly thought of program. Again, a document viewer to deal with PDFs and weird things that you just want to read things, not make changes to them. And this is the program that they give you to deal with spreadsheets. Under Other, well, no, let's talk about AbiWord for a minute. It looks very similar to Word. And again, if you want to read more about it, there's quite a bit on their own site, as well as been written about the program. Under Other, there are two types of terminals. One is the Ubuntu, actually Ubuntu, and then this is specific to the program. Sound and Video. Audacious is the audio program to deal with MP3s. This player is the same as what was in Linux Mint. It is okay, works fine. What shows up here, I plugged in a no drivers webcam, and it had a microphone in it. Webcams, there are only a few that work specifically with Linux, that have drivers written for Linux. Turns out that the generic one worked just fine. Audio was a little fuzzy, but certainly not bad. And this is the burning program that comes with Ubuntu. So now we're going to see a little bit of the plugged-in webcam as I was doing some testing on it. Okay, we're up to system tools, and some of these things will look semi-familiar from the Mint. Again, your printer button is here and does virtually the same thing, and connected to my wireless printers without any problem at all. They have their own software center as well as a separate one here. Their center basically has everything that Ubuntu has, so it's big. There are lots of programs, depending on how much horsepower your computer has is how many of those things you want to load up. But basically they give you enough that you can do all the things that we talked about earlier in the presentation without adding anything more to it. Preferences. Again, looks familiar. They have a Bluetooth manager and desktop preferences and things that you might want to change, keyboard and mouse, monitor settings, and so on. This run button is another almost terminal type thing where you can type in specific commands from that list that we saw earlier in the presentation. These are individual commands that you would want to run from here, simple commands. And so I opened up one of the package managers here, and this is the window that you get when you open that up, and you click on search and type in what you're looking for, and over here are categories if you want to look under categories, or you can just, if you specifically want something, you can type it in here. It brings it up. You click on that you want to install that package. So no package is selected, that you want to install that package, and it gives you the option then to install it. Fairly simple process. It's not quite as easy as Mint, but fairly simple. So I wanted to give you a look at their File Explorer, and this one was looking at the hard drive of this old XP machine that actually had RAID hard drives, and it had two 250s that looked as one 500, which you don't want to try and install Linux on a RAID hard drive system. It didn't recognize it, and I spent a couple hours reading and couldn't get a good answer, so I didn't. But anyhow, what I want to show you here is that you can indeed, with Linux, look at a Windows hard drive. This is the Windows hard drive on that machine, and we were looking at a folder called NEOPC March of 13, and these are the things that were in that folder. So it works extremely well even with Windows formatted hard drives. Unfortunately, it isn't going to work in the other direction. Yes, indeed, the terminals, we are going to try and avoid them at all costs. I mentioned earlier genealogy. There are two programs written specifically for Linux that are packages that install quickly. Gramps I've looked at in the past, and it's a highly thought of program by novices as well as some professional people use Gramps. There are other programs, some are web-based, and then there's Java-based programs. You can read more about it here if you care to. But you don't have to give up, and if you want to use your Windows type program, you can put it into the Linux computer using Wine. Zoom. Well, yes indeed, you can put Zoom in native Linux, and here are some instructions, and this went on and on. I didn't scroll down, but there are specific ways to put in. You do use the terminal when you're going to put it in this way. And how about Dropbox, another one that I use on a regular basis. Okay, so if you're going to do it the right way, it would be Ubuntu is what you would use, although Natty is where you would put in Mint. And this is what it says. You have to type this in. Now you have to type in this line, but you replace Natty with Mint here. And then after you do that, you have to type in this information. It goes to MIT, a server at MIT, to get a particular file to make it work. Or put it in with Wine, and again it was rated using Wine 1.5.14. It was rated as Platinum, no problems at all. So do it either way. If you don't feel like using the terminal, put it in with Wine. So the title of this article, Why You Don't Need an Antivirus on Linux, and when you do. Yeah, you could get a virus. Chances are slim, but you could. There are virus programs written for Linux. This is one that I've used in the past to protect thumb drives, actually. ClamWin is the one I used, but this is ClamAV. And they have it for all the different distributions of Linux. And you can see that they have it for other operating systems also. Updated daily, as good as any, I guess, although viruses are becoming more and more of a problem. So anyhow, there is one for Linux, although your chances of needing it are certainly less than they were with a Windows machine, and now even an Apple machine. So we saw earlier that if you're running Linux, you can look at Windows files. But if you're running Windows, can you look at Linux files? If you've put both Linux...
You got mail.
Uh-oh. I've got mail. I'll deal with that later. If you're running a dual boot machine, so you've got Linux and Windows on the same machine, we know that you can read the Windows files from Linux, but can you read the Linux files from Windows? Then again, this is with Mint looking, we looked at that particular computer that I had that on, had a lot of hard drives connected to it, and we looked at one of them and into a folder here that had some letters that I had written, and both Word and OpenOffice formats, so you can read there no problem. Going the other way, if you're in Windows and you want to read Linux, you're going to need some help. You're going to have to get a program to interface, because Linux uses a different format for their files. It says here that they use ext2 or ext3, and there is now ext4 are their file systems and partitions. So you do need a program that you can get here to read Linux files that are in a Linux partition if you're running Windows on a dual boot machine. And before you get involved in any of this at all, and you should do on a regular basis, as we've talked many times about, you need to back up before you start doing any of this stuff. So you can make your own live disk. And a live disk means that you can run Linux off the disk, and it also will allow you to install it. And the installs usually are, you can install it alongside the current operating system, or you can completely format the hard drive and just load the Linux system on it. All these different distributions, you can go and get what's called the ISO file, which is an installation file for operating systems. This is Ubuntu, their current one. I just use it to show you. 64-bit is recommended, but they have a 32-bit, and they're saying for machines with less than 2 gigabytes of RAM, and that's pretty good. Even though the machine might be able to run 64-bit, if you have less than 2 gigs of RAM, it's probably a good idea to download the 32-bit version. So you can do this for almost all of the Linux distributions. So once you download the file and you've got the file and you know where it is, what are you going to do with it? And I've been recommending this program forever. CD Burner XP, and it works with everything. It works all the way through. It's been tested with Windows 10, and it works just great. So if you have this file, and it's a small program. If you have this installed, you start the program, and this is the window that will come up, and you click on Burn an ISO image, and click OK, and this window comes up, and you browse to that file that you just downloaded, and click Burn a disk, and it will burn the disk. Do not finalize the disk. Leave it open, because some of the things that you do can be saved to the disk, which will save you some time if you're going to still keep running it on the disk. Not every distribution is that way, but a good deal of them are. So if you decide to try a different distribution than what we're talking about tonight, and I've only got a limited number of disks available, so you may have to burn your own, and this is how it's done. So you then put the disk in, and you turn the machine on, and you're probably going to see this on a black screen blinking at you. Boot type. So what do you do then? Well, typically 99% of the machines that you'll be working on, the BIOS is set up to boot the machine in this order. First boot would be the CD-ROM. The second boot is the hard drive, and so on. Some of them go down into USB devices and so on, but typically they're set up so you just type in the number 1 and press enter. So the next big question is, after you've shut your Windows machine down, how do you get the disk into the machine so you can boot to Linux? And virtually all CD drives and DVD drives have got a little hole in them. It's usually either right here above the button or over on the left-hand side right there. And if you take a paper clip and open it up and straighten it out and shove that, and it just fits in that little tiny hole, and shove that in the hole, it'll open the drawer. And you can put the disk in, so you can then close the drawer and turn the power on. And depending on the machine, sometimes you may have to shut it down, pull the plug again, and restart it, because once that drive is open, it may not recognize it until it's had a chance to cycle. Just some little things that you may run into that I can save you some time. I've dealt with them a lot. This I debated on putting in here, but I've had questions on it, and partitioning a hard drive is something, unless you are comfortable doing it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But those that have asked and whatever, I've paid for programs, I've got free ones, whatever, and this is by far and away, I found this, making this presentation, by far and away the best partition program that I've run into. Whether you do it or you let Linux do it, if you're going to put Linux on a computer, the drive has to be partitioned. This is how you can do it manually, and if you're going to uninstall Linux, you're going to need this particular piece of software. So it's free, and it works extremely well. Again, if you're going to be doing any of this stuff, and even if you aren't going to be doing any of this stuff, you need to at least once a month. And that's probably not enough, but if you do it once a month, that's better than most people are doing. So back up. So I typed in a Google search Linux tutorials and got 31,900,000 hits. And Linux tutorial for beginners, complete beginner's guide. There is a unbelievable amount of free information available out there, and each one of these distributions, Mint and Ubuntu, has their own community that more than happy to help you with any problem at all. Some of the replies are a little technical for some, and all you have to do is say, hey, I'm new at this, and they'll give you a hand. Write it in terms that you'll be able to understand. But there is a ton of information available out there. So you've got it installed and you say, I'm not going to use this anymore, I want it gone. There's very little written about how to get rid of it. This is the best article I've seen, and it does go through it step by step. So if you've got it on your computer and you decide you don't want it anymore, you're going to go here and find out how to get rid of it, and you're going to need that free partition program I mentioned. That's how I feel after having made this presentation for you folks. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but again, I wanted to make sure that if you chose to do Linux, you'd be able to do it without having to use the terminal, and you pretty much can. So hopefully some of you are going to give it a try, and we're ready for questions. But remember that this presentation, this video, is going to be on the NEOPC forum under educational presentations, and you're going to have a PDF list of all of the links that were in this presentation. So that's all we've got to say about Linux this evening anyhow.